Imagine this. A girl so small her feet don't touch the ground when she sits on the wedding throne. Her ankles swing softly above the marble floor, her shoes too stiff, her breath too shallow. The air smells like crushed lavender. And something else. Something metallic. Something sharp. But everyone pretends not to notice. They call her a queen, but she's only 12. You can hear the music outside. A slow procession of viols and flutes and shallow drums, the sound of celebration. But in here, the silence is thick. Cloaked women lace her gown tighter, pulling the ivory silk until her ribs ache. The embroidery cuts into her arms. Tiny lions, suns, and winged serpents are stitched into her sleeves, symbols of purity, power, divinity. She doesn't understand them, but they scratch her skin when she moves. A woman kisses her forehead and calls it a blessing. She doesn't flinch. She has learned not to flinch. That was lesson number 1. The door creaks open and he steps in. Your brother. Your groom. He's only 4 years older. Still a boy in most eyes. But today they call him His Majesty. The crown sits heavy on his head and his smile is calm, practiced. He walks toward you as if this is normal. As if you're not siblings, as if you have a choice, but you don't. Because this is a royal wedding, and the bloodline must stay pure. You rise when they tell you, kneel when they gesture, recite the vow they placed in your mouth like a spoonful of sugar. And when your brother takes your hand, warm, steady, too familiar, you don't look at him. You stare at the candle behind his shoulder and pretend the flame is brighter than his eyes. Because if you see his face, you might remember. You might remember the games you played in the garden, the stories he told you by firelight, the way he used to tuck your braid into your collar and call you his little lion. And if you remember that, it will ruin everything, because now you are his bride. And tonight, there will be no stories, just a bed, just your body, just silence. Before we go further into this forgotten tale, consider subscribing to this channel, because girls like her, married into silence, dressed in gold, erased before they could speak, deserve to be remembered. And someone needs to say what history tried to hide. The crowd erupts when the kiss is sealed. Not a tender kiss, not a brother's kiss, a king's kiss. Slow, public, measured. You taste the wine on his lips. You taste your own fear. Somewhere behind you, your veil slips. A servant catches it before it hits the ground. That's the moment they'll paint later. A perfect image for a tapestry. The young queen in white and gold, smiling faintly. Veil floating like a ghost behind her. No one will weave the truth. That her hands were shaking. That her legs were numb. That when he led her from the altar, her fingers were ice. They'll say she was divine, but she was just a girl who wasn't allowed to say no, a girl who didn't know what wife meant until it was too late, a girl whose cradle hadn't even grown cold. She was born on a red moon. They said that meant power, destiny, favour from the gods. The midwives whispered it first, her skin too pale, her cries too strong. The cord wrapped once around her neck, and yet she survived. The court ran with it. By the time she opened her eyes, she had already become a symbol. The bloodline had thinned, they said. The royal line had grown fragile. But she was proof it could be reborn. Her mother bled for 3 days after the birth. No one speaks of that. What they do speak of is the child's hands. How they curled into fists before the priest could bless her. How she locked eyes with the bishop during baptism and didn't blink. She was 3 when they taught her to walk with her hands folded. 4 when they took away her toy horse because queens don't ride. 5 when her first tutor handed her a scroll not with stories, but with treaties. Her father sat her on his lap and told her she would marry a king. Her uncle corrected him. She would make one. Every doll she owned wore a crown. Every mirror she looked into told her, "You are not a girl, you are a relic." She wasn't allowed to run. Running made the blood hot, and the blood must stay cool, controlled, preserved. They weighed her meals, counted her breaths, measured the curve of her spine every month. She asked why once. They said her bones must be perfect, because her children would carry the throne in their teeth. She didn't understand, but she stopped asking. One morning, she awoke with blood between her legs. A maid saw the stain and cried, not in horror, in joy. The priest was summoned before the physician. The whole palace rang with bells. She was 11. They said she was ready. Her mother brought her a necklace with the family crest and laid it against her collarbone. It felt like a brand. They told her she was sacred, chosen, the only one who could protect the kingdom's future. But sacred things are not held gently. Sacred things are broken open. Before we tell you how they used her, we must show you how they prepared her. If this story stirs something in you, anger, sorrow, recognition, consider subscribing to this channel. Because history is full of girls like her, turned into symbols before they even learned to speak. And someone needs to tell their stories without the crowns and without the lies. She watched her cousin, 2 years older, be sent to a convent for smiling at a stable boy. She never smiled again. She learned to curtsy so low her knees ached for hours. She learned the lineage of every man who ever wore a crown. She learned how to keep her mouth closed while still breathing. At night, she'd lie still in her velvet-draped bed, staring up at the carved ceiling, tracing the angels etched in the wood with her eyes. And she'd whisper to them, not prayers, questions. Will I ever get to choose? Will anyone ever ask what I want? But angels don't answer girls like her. Only kings do. And the king had already decided she would marry her brother because their blood was too precious to spill, and her body was never hers to begin with. The first time he came to her chamber, he knocked. Not like a husband, like a stranger. She sat at the edge of the bed, arms folded tight around her knees, in a nightdress chosen by someone else. She'd been bathed, brushed, powdered. Her braid had been loosened just enough to fall across her shoulder. The candles flickered as the door creaked open. He smiled. She did not. He called her my lioness, but she felt like prey. He moved slowly, carefully, as if that made it better, as if the quietness would soften what was about to happen. He took her hand, kissed her cheek. She didn't pull away. That was another lesson. Never resist, never tremble, never cry in a way that makes noise. The bed didn't creak, but she did. And when he finally left, hours or minutes later, she couldn't tell, she lay on her back, eyes open, staring at the canopy. The sheets smelled of lavender and sweat. The next morning they called it love. They toasted to royal unity at court. A poet sang verses about moonlit passion between crowned siblings. The ladies in waiting giggled and fanned themselves. Her mother-in-law, her aunt, said she had the glow of a wife. No one asked why her hands wouldn't stop shaking. This was the rhythm of her days now. Silk in the morning, silence at night. Her every move choreographed, her every word weighed. She smiled when told to, sat when told to, dressed in gold when her husband requested it, and undressed when he came again. The palace praised her devotion. The priest blessed her womb. She bled again. Then she didn't. And then she began to feel sick in the mornings. They cheered. They kissed her hand. They said the kingdom would have an heir. They did not say she was 12. They did not say she whispered to herself in the dark, tracing her own palm with trembling fingers, reminding herself where her skin ended and his began. Because even that was starting to blur. Before we continue this descent, I want to ask you something. If you've made it this far, if your heart is aching the way hers did, consider subscribing to this channel. These stories weren't written for women, but they were lived by them. And now, finally, they can be told with truth. There were moments she forgot who she was. moments when she stared at her reflection and saw not a girl, not a queen, but an object, a vessel, a womb wrapped in velvet. Her voice, once soft, now barely existed. She answered only in nods, in gestures. Words felt dangerous. They could betray her, or worse, be used against her. She stopped asking for books. She stopped writing her thoughts in the leather-bound journal beneath her bed, because once a maid read it and smiled and told the bishop she was dreaming of escape. After that, the journal disappeared. So did the maid. At court, they called her Radiant, but the truth was simpler. She was vanishing, not all at once, just in pieces. A word here, a memory there, a small life slowly erased by royal duty. And the nights kept coming, always with silk sheets, always with silence, always with him. The first time she vomits, it's into her sleeve. No one sees, no one helps. She wipes her mouth on the lace and stares at the stain. Red threads bloom through white. She says nothing. That's what queens do. By the end of the week, the palace knows. The bishop declares it a miracle, the bloodline preserved. The court physician bows lower than ever. He calls it a blessing from God. He says her hips will widen like her mother's did. He says she is ready. She is 12, and her stomach is already beginning to rise. It happens slowly. First the silence, then the surveillance. Everywhere she goes, eyes follow. Every breath is measured, every bite of bread dissected. A royal midwife is assigned to her chamber. Her robes are adjusted to show the swell. The court painter begins a new portrait. The queen as vessel, the queen as empty, the queen as useful. Her womb is now the center of the kingdom. Ministers speak of her as if she's not in the room. They say the succession is secure and the prophecy is fulfilled. No one says the word pregnant. That would be vulgar. They speak in riddles, in metaphors, in scripture. But she knows what's happening. She feels it. The heaviness in her limbs, the way her skin itches from the inside out. The dreams, blood-soaked, breathless, that wake her before dawn. She asks if she can see her mother's grave. They say no. Too much risk, too much movement, too many eyes. She asks if her brother will visit her less now. They say no. That would look suspicious. She begins to keep a piece of bread beneath her pillow, just in case the baby comes hungry, just in case she doesn't make it through. The child moves inside her once, just once. A flutter, like the wing of a trapped bird. It brings her no joy, only fear. Because in that moment she realizes it's real. There is a life growing inside her, and it belongs to her brother. You don't have to imagine this. She lived it, and her story wasn't the only one. If you believe this should be known, not hidden behind palaces and paintings, subscribe to this channel. These aren't fairy tales, they're warnings. The nausea becomes unbearable. She vomits in corners, in bowls, once in the chapel. The priest pretends not to see. The court blames the baby for her weakness. They say pregnancy humbles even the strongest queens. She's not strong. She's breaking. Her bones ache. Her breasts swell. She bleeds once, just once, and the palace freezes. A physician is called in the night. He whispers to her behind a curtain. His hands are cold. He says she must stay very still now, for the child, for the crown. She lays in bed for weeks watching dust float in beams of sunlight. She counts the hours by the rhythm of footsteps in the corridor. She doesn't speak. She doesn't cry. No one dares say what they all know, that she was too young, that this was not love, that this was a kingdom feeding on the body of a child. The cradle is carved. Before the labor even begins, oak, gold, lined in red silk. She touches it once, and then draws her hand back, as if it burned. It starts with pain, not the sharp kind, the slow kind, the kind that coils behind her spine and creeps into her thighs like something alive. She tries to stand, but the world spins. Her knees buckle. The midwife catches her before she hits the floor. "It's too early," they whisper, "too soon." But the baby doesn't care. The room is cleared, curtains drawn, windows sealed. A brazier is lit near the bed, heavy with burning herbs. The smell makes her gag. She's lowered onto the mattress with hands that pretend to comfort, but really just position. There are 6 women in the chamber now. None of them speak her name. Only titles, only commands, only prayers. The pain thickens, rolling through her in waves. Her hands claw at the sheets, her feet push against the mattress. Her nightgown soaks with sweat, then blood. They whisper that everything is fine, that this is normal, that queens have done this for centuries. She screams, not words, not even sound, just fear. A raw sound pulled from the part of her that still remembers being a child, hiding under her mother's cloak during thunderstorms. That part of her is still here, still trapped, still begging. She cries out for her mother, but no one comes. Her brother waits outside the chamber. He is not pacing. He is not weeping. He is speaking with his advisors about the child's name, about coronation plans, about how to announce the heir. Inside, her body's unraveling. The baby won't turn. They press on her stomach. They force her legs wider. They murmur things she doesn't understand. Her eyes roll back. Her lips go dry. One of the midwives holds her hand and says she's brave. She isn't. She's dying. You've heard fairy tales. Queens giving birth to kings. Chosen women delivering destiny. But this wasn't glory. It wasn't divine. It was suffering, and it was preventable. If you believe the truth should be louder than the myth, subscribe to this channel. Because girls like her weren't meant to be legends. They were meant to live. The baby comes just before dawn. Slick, silent, then a cry, a strong one. They wrap him in cloth of gold and hand him off before she even sees his face. The physician leans in to speak to her, but her eyes are already closed. Her lips move once, just once, but no one knows what she said. Then she goes still, not soft, not peaceful, just still. They cover her with a velvet sheet. They call it a complication. They say she was too fragile. They blame fate. They blame time. They blame God. But never themselves. The bells don't toll. There's no public mourning. The baby is paraded through the palace in a silver cradle. The court drinks wine. The poets write verses. The painter starts a new canvas. The queen in eternal sleep. They use the word sacrifice. They use the word holy. But never child. Never sister, never victim. She was 12, and she died giving birth to her brother's baby. They placed him in her cradle, not the one she slept in as a girl, the one they carved for her child before her labour began, gilded with lions, padded with red silk, trimmed in lace spun from prayers and denial. The baby prince lies there now, swaddled in linen embroidered with scripture. He does not cry. They say that means he is wise. They say silence runs in the blood. They sprinkle rose petals across the chamber floor, not for her, but for him. The air smells like celebration, like milk and incense and crushed blossoms. The queen's scent is gone. The blood has been washed from the bed. The windows are open. The sun has returned. They do not speak of her, not the pain, not the hours, not the stillness. Only the glory of what came next. The court calls him divine. The priests bow lower than ever. The bishop kisses the infant's brow and declares him twice blessed. Once for his birth, and once for what it cost. The whispers of incest vanish into incense. The rumours of her screams are buried under hymns. Her age becomes a footnote. Her name becomes a title, the Mother Sovereign. Statues are commissioned. One shows her seated, serene, child in arms. But she never held him. They cut that part from the story and replaced it with grace. Her brother, now only referred to as the father of the future, holds the child with one arm and lifts a goblet with the other. The court cheers, the child blinks once, and the world moves forward. A generation of girls will be taught her story, not as a warning, but as a miracle. They will learn of her obedience, her purity, her sacred womb. No one will mention the bruises, the vomiting, the prayers that weren't answered. No one will say she was 12, just that she was holy, just that she was willing. But she wasn't. She was chosen, which is just another word for trapped. Before we reveal how they buried her for good, make sure you're with us. These stories weren't carved into stone, they were erased from it. And the only way to remember her, really remember her, is to keep telling the truth. Subscribe now and don't let them silence her again. The prince grows quickly. They say his smile is his mother's. They say his temper is his father's. They say his destiny is untouchable, a product of divine union, royal prophecy, celestial blood. But no one ever tells him the truth. No one tells him she died calling for a woman who had already left the world. No one tells him that every candle lit in his name once burned beside her bed as she bled. No one tells him that the velvet cradle was soaked through before it ever held him. They build chapels in her honour and keep them locked. They write hymns in her name, but never sing them aloud. They preserve her portrait, but not her story. She becomes what all royal girls become when they die young and beautiful and quiet. A ghost draped in gold, a legend without a voice, a sacrifice disguised as glory. They never meant for you to find her, not in the scrolls, not in the hymns, not in the bloodline charts hanging behind glass. She wasn't erased, she was buried. But time is cruel in the way it forgets, and kind in the way it leaves cracks. A letter, folded inside a priest's robe, unsigned, unaddressed, just 8 words in faded ink. She screamed, and none of us moved. A midwife's note found in a sealed chest, stained with something brown and ancient. It lists the hours of labour, the weight of the child. Then a final line. The mother lost too much. A statue, headless, crumbling in a palace garden, once held a baby in one arm. The plaque calls her the Queen of Peace, but moss now covers the name. You piece her together in fragments. A name scratched out of the family Bible, a page missing from a wedding registry, a lullaby no one sings anymore. You weren't supposed to know she existed, but now you do, and you can't unknow it. You've seen what they did to her, how they praised her into silence, crowned her with expectation, cut her voice from the history they claimed to protect. They called it sacred. You know better. They called it sacrifice. You know it was survival denied. History remembers kings who conquered, generals who burned cities, prophets who claimed divine voices. But the girl in the tower, the girl beneath the veil, the girl whose body was used and then discarded, they don't write songs for her. That's why we're here. Not to honour her crown, but to mourn the girl they buried under it. She was not a myth. She was not a mother. She was a child, and someone should have told her no. She deserved time to grow, to question, to run in bare feet down stone corridors without being told she was wasting herself. She deserved a life, one where her womb wasn't a battleground, where her brother wasn't her fate, where the silk sheets weren't soaked in fear. You are the one carrying her now, you who watched this far, who felt the weight of her silence, the cold of her chamber, the heat of her final breath. You are her record. You are the truth they tried to drown. So when you speak of queens, speak of her, not with reverence, but with rage.